Often I like to look at material outside of kaiju and see where I could find similarities, or just a new understanding of the genre I enjoy. With much of modern media mopping about in mediocrity, I slowly turned to older works such as those of Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs to satisfy my fantasy and sci-fi itch. H.P. Lovecraft too has also been one of these outlets, and through one of his works and its elaboration by another YouTuber did I find the topic of this video, and that being, is Bokrug a prototype Godzilla? Now, to address the shoggoths in the room. If you are in any way uncomfortable with looking at anything Lovecraft related because of his views, probably due to an unnuanced look at his life, the time he lived in, you can safely go look at any other content on my channel or other creators on the platform. However, a rather in-depth look at what happened in Lovecraft's life and how those views were shaped and changed is in this video here by WNR. I hope you enjoy it. And to address the other eldritch horror in the room, no, I'm not insinuating that Toho used Bokrug as part of their inspiration. What has and hasn't influenced them is heavily documented. This video is really only looking at interesting literary parallels that exist between these two creatures, separated by thousands of miles and several decades. Though, it is interesting to note, however, that Lovecraft's work has been creeping around Japan since the 40s. And outside of his work going through several adaptations, the Ultra series, especially the Heisei ones, directly reference the Mythos entities, whether by pulling names, such as Bokrug being no exception, although the kaiju that appeared in episode 5 of Ultraman Gaia has a slightly different spelling to it. And in Ultraman Tiga, we literally have a tentacled monster rising from the sunken city of Relay, so there's that. But if you want to watch some more videos that have to do with Lovecraft in Japan, there's two in the link in the description, which are from the Archer Reporter and Zentai Japan respectively. Now, as I said, the main reason I came to this video idea comes from a line mentioned by the YouTuber Grimdark Half Off when talking about the gods of Conan, which I'll play for you now.
As you can tell from our notes page, it is very fitting that we are going over the King Kong and Godzilla of Conan in the same video. Both Godzilla and Bokrug are a deeper metaphor for the consequences of unreasonable violence in different ways, and that any society which plays with the fires of sadism will also be burned by them.
Now, the key points I want to take away from the comparison between the two monsters would be those of unreasonable violence, the sins of the father or generational sin, and being burned by your own sadism. For those unfamiliar with the doom that came to Sarnath, which Bokrug appears in, allow me to take you through it. Taking place in the land of Manar, we learn of its inhabitants, and a key location of this place is a lake, which on the other side of it sits the city of Ib. This city is inhabited by a race of amphibian creatures who worship the great water lizard, Bokrug. The humans who would go on to build Sarnath hated and were disgusted by the beings of Ib, and because of their hate, would raid the city, killing its inhabitants and razing Ib to the ground. And to add further insults, they would take the statue of Bokrug and place it in their own temples as a trophy of conquest. However, after the pillaging of Ib, strange lights would be seen over the lake, and the idol would soon disappear. And stranger still, one of their great priests was found dead of fear. And he also had scrawled something, a sign, and that sign would be of doom. The doom to Sarnath. For centuries, Sarnath would flourish, but only few would remember the omen. And as the city civilized and expanded with trade and conquest, their elegance grew, but so too did their arrogance and decadence. And Sarnath had also made its ceremony to celebrate the day of Ib's destruction. And on that day also, waves from the lake would rise high, and a green stone wall had to be erected to stop them. And those waves, they would only rise to these weird sizes on this specific day. But despite this, Sarnath would flourish. The great city of marble and jewel was the pride of Manar and the lands beyond. Temples, palaces, and art were all grand, and the city's golden age would demonstrate the heights we could reach, but also what progress can lead to. As the learned figures of this people looked down from the highest temples on the city and the lake below, they would perform rites in mocking defilement of Bokrug. And this is despite allowing many other deities and its disciples to pray and rest in Sarnath. But once again, the celebrations of Ib's destruction came, honors hoisted on the memories of their ancestors who slaughtered the people of Ib, and the people danced and feasted to celebrate the cruelty from centuries long past, and they cursed the dead. Although the intellectuals were at first apprehensive due to knowing better and what had happened to their number of centuries ago, decadence had infected them all the same, and they too would indulge in the hedonic degeneracy of the people. And on the 1000th year of the celebration of Ib's destruction, all from Manaar came to Sarnath, no expense spared, and on this day too, fish from the lake were feasted upon, laid on golden plates. But the priest watched as shadows crept from the moon into the lake, leaving the city in the haze, and the lights appeared once again, and close to midnight, the gates would be flung open, and men came pouring in fear, as hordes of inhuman beings appeared outside of Sarnath. And to those who fled, great stories were told in fear and hushed whispers. And those brave enough to travel back to where Sarnath was would find only a barren shore, but it said something was found. A green idol chiseled in the image of Bokrug, the water lizard. If you want to listen to the story in full, I have a link to an audiobook version here on YouTube. But from first glance, many of you are probably wondering why I think any of this has to do with Godzilla. So let's start with the first point, and that being unreasonable violence. In the story, the people of Sarnath kill the people of Ib for no reason other than their disgust of them. Many of you may be drawing parallels to the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And although these were the influences of Godzilla in a vacuum, these events sprung from a winding series of battles, deliberation, and reaction to a singular event, and that event was Pearl Harbor.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
With Japan's frustration and desire for a wide-reaching empire, the choice to cripple America and assure their Pacific supremacy was greenlit.
The raid only lasted 75 minutes. The Japanese destroyed or damaged nearly 20 American naval vessels, including 8 battleships and more than 340 airplanes. Over 2,400 Americans died in the attack, and many more were wounded.
But despite this, Japan was confident in its ability to contend with the US. But like the Doom, some were skeptical, and across the lake the Americans mobilized. And it's posited by some that if Japan had not done this action, then what happened would not come. 4 years of fighting, over 25 million deaths, and that just being conservative estimates. And the idea of Japan standing strong on the laurels of its victories in the Russo-Japanese War, and their inability to be conquered by the Mongols centuries before, had bred an air of superiority that was pervasive in its military leadership, creating a decadence, but also sadism that allowed for atrocities like Nanking to happen, and the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. And as Godzilla symbolizes the atomic bomb and the fear and trauma that it could happen again, the knowledge at the end of the story is similar, that the idol of Bokrug still stands, and Sarnath does not, and the people of Manaar now know that such destruction could happen again, and that could bring low any civilization, no matter how grand. And even looking at the two, Bokrug from early interpretations to even later ones doesn't fit the mold of other entities in the mythos. This makes sense though, being that it was published a year after Dagon in 1920, and the Call of Cthulhu coming almost a decade later. The tentacled horrors of the mythos are mostly predated by the water lizard, but the idea of a reptilian god isn't too outlandish. Given that in Asian mythology, dragons, as opposed to the demonic sheep-stealing gold hoarders of European mythology, are divine beings linked to water. And somewhere in the middle, many Native American tribes have myths relating to large serpentine lake monsters. And of course, the sea monster that Lovecraft would have been familiar with, having grown up here in New England, is the Leviathan of the Bible. The Leviathan is the Anglosphere's main chaos serpent, and relating back to my video about Kong and Godzilla, and how they often mimic the Chaos Conf, both Godzilla and Bokrug are beings that are worshipped, and through the subsiding of their wrath is knowledge then gleaned. And in both cases, the point gleaned in a general sense is about the responsibility of power and how important it is for decadence to be checked. Japan and Sarnath both, through their actions, commit a grievous act, which sets in motion their fall, and it is only after their fall is that clairvoyance is achieved. and like the kings and priests of Sarnath, it is the action of the emperor and the Japanese generals and those in authority that would harm their people the most, subjecting them to commit atrocities in their name to expand their empires, and ultimately being the ones who feel the painful retaliations the most. The sins of the father, or in this case, the leaders of society, being passed on to their people. And if you want to understand dragons and their proto-narratives further and in more in depth, there's a video also in the description that goes over these many myths that I sadly do not have the time for. And although one-for-one comparisons are more difficult when it comes to the original Godzilla, there's one incarnation where it feels far more paralleled, that incarnation being the 2001 GMK Godzilla. Oftentimes when people see this incarnation, they see it as the evilest incarnation, and the title of God of Destruction and being the antagonist of the film doesn't garner sympathy. However, what should be noted is that this Godzilla is not just an animal, but the collective souls of those who died during World War II. A quote from the book, Behind the Kaiju Curtain by Norman England, and a close friend of Shusuke Kaneko, who would also write a foreword for this book, states the following: I see him as a ghost, one influenced by the spirits of victims of World War II. When I say victims, I mean those who suffered, Japanese, Chinese, British, and American. Godzilla is the manifestation of their pain and anguish. He's the embodiment of their wrath. Similar to the destruction of Ib and killing of its people, being the collective wrong that Bokrug corrects. But what's more interesting is this next line that cements this comparison further to me. In GMK, I plan to suggest it's because Japanese have forgotten the sins of their fathers, and that affluence and luxury have made them complacent. Godzilla doesn't like this. He's angry at the Japanese people and wants to smash them. A clear statement that not just the pain itself, but the decadence of the civilization is what causes doom to come to Japan. What's crazier still is that this interpretation of Godzilla is separated from the first by 47 years and from Bokrug over 81 years. But that's all I've got for y'all. This was a really fun video looking at two of my favorite things, Lovecraft and Godzilla. Give a like, follow, comment your thoughts, and even in the comments too, tell me other characters you think have very interesting parallels to Godzilla, whether it be a specific incarnation or the character as a whole. But anyways, check out the other stuff I have in the description. This stuff is really interesting to look at, and I hope you find it interesting too. And I'm Zimzilla, and I'll see you guys next time.